Bickert from Aptum, and I'm pleased to introduce our keynote speaker today. First, a little bit about Aptum. Aptum is the culmination of a series of mergers and acquisitions over 30 years in the making. Each organizational change allowed us to add offerings and strengthen our technical capabilities, enabling us to provide a more complete portfolio of service to our clients. Aptum specializes in engineering, program management, environmental services, disaster recovery, complex facility maintenance, and construction services. We have over 10,000 employees and serve the government, oil, gas, chemical, industrial, commercial, and power clients. A few highlights include we're one of the primary suppliers for DoD's fuels and POL missions and have executed over 350 projects exceeding $750 million over the last 20 years. We also provide critical support to impacted communities during disasters. We had a critical role following both the Baton Rouge flooding and Hurricane Harvey to provide food, shelter, and temporary housing. We're providing temporary power to Puerto Rico through one of our Corps contracts. We also successfully executed the Corps' largest cost-reimbursable design-build project, a $1.3 billion project for construction of the IHNC surge barrier in New Orleans. Aptum also provides mission-critical support services at operating bases such as Kings Bay Submarine Base and the National Training Center in Fort Irwin. We provide comprehensive services for environmental programs such as food rep, munitions, RCRA, circular remediation. Our expertise includes decontamination, decommissioning, and demolition of radiological structures, with one notable project being the Sturgis Barge Project. Whether it's safeguarding and maintaining critical power infrastructure, helping communities recover from natural disasters, enabling our armed forces and first responders, or transforming landfills into public parks, we go to work each day knowing that we're making an impact on the world. These are huge responsibilities, and we take them seriously. In October of 2001, following the attacks on 9/11, Commander Mark Nutsch led a heroic 12-man Green Beret team of U.S. Special Forces on a covert mission to Afghanistan, where they would ride to war on horses to fight the enemy, capture the strategic city of MAZAR-E SHARIF within a matter of weeks, and successfully overthrow the Taliban. This story, featured in the 2018 major motion picture 12 Strong, starring actor Chris Hemsworth, shares the now declassified true life story of helping lead what is considered the most successful unconventional warfare campaign in modern history. Commander Nutsch is here to reveal his behind-the-scenes account of how this almost unbelievable victory played out and the lessons he learned on leadership, teamwork, and perseverance. Please join me in welcoming Mark Nutsch.
You taking me to school again?
And picking you up.
Daddy.
2 planes have crashed into the World Trade Center, and apparently terrorists have died.
What is that, part of some drill? Ain't no drill.
19 men attacked our country. The 12 of you will be the first ones to fight back.
How do you love your family and leave them to go to war?
I have 2 hours. I'll be really quick.
Not a chance. Holding out is the only way I can guarantee you come back to me.
War's gonna be over in like a week.
I don't care how long you're gone, as long as you come back.
Every step we take is gonna be on a minefield from 100 different wars. Odds are we're not all gonna make it out of this.
If we don't take that city, World Trade Center is just the beginning.
We're teaming up with the general of the Northern Alliance that we know nothing about. General, you show me exactly where we're going.
Over the mountains. We take horses.
All right, who's ridden before? Anyone?
Summer camp when I was 9.
Spring break, but I was pretty hammered.
Does it have a name? The name.
Great, this will be fun. We're outnumbered. 50,000 Taliban Al-Qaeda fighters. We're on our own. I can't order anyone to do this.
You want to surrender?
Keep your finger on the trigger.
Stay there.
Oh, God.
Well, I won't back down.
There's no playbook here. We're gonna have to write it ourselves.
No, I won't back down.
I ain't losing one man on this team.
You could stand me up at the gates of hell, but I won't back down.
We're fighting with horsemen against tanks.
The greatest weapon in history is this.
There ain't no easy way out.
If you die, that's a letter you and your wife are gonna wish you wrote.
I made you a promise. I'm coming home. declassified true story of the horse soldiers.
Good afternoon. I'm Major Mark Nutsch. Recently completed 24 years of active reserve and IRR service as Green Beret, predominant of that time. But, it's an honor and privilege to be here in Kansas City and address your conference. I wanted to share that little movie trailer clip that's out. It's gaining a lot of momentum, again, as a home entertainment right now. But really what's in it for me, what's in it for my team, is it gives us an opportunity like this to come out and share a little bit of our story finally, and share a little bit about the real men and the real mission, and not so much about the fictional film. For this crowd, I know you remember that horrific day, September 11th, 2001. Where were you? What were you doing? Did you have loved ones that were involved? For me personally and my team members, we didn't personally know anyone that was killed among those nearly 3,000 American citizens that were murdered that day. While most of America was staring at that smoldering pile on their TV screens, or that hole in the wall in the Pentagon, or that field in Pennsylvania as those stories came out, my team and I were inspired by them. While most of America was wondering what's happening next, I want to assure you that within the DoD community and the intelligence communities, and specifically within the Special Operations Command and Central Command down in Tampa, there were some things happening. People were meeting and trying to figure out who exactly had just attacked us and present options that could be presented to our national command authorities. President Bush chose that main strategy of matching teams of CIA paramilitary operatives with small 12-man teams of Army Green Berets. And by fate, my team was picked out of our entire 5th Special Forces group based at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and became designated as Task Force Dagger. My team became one of the first to insert and spearhead those operations. I know the folks in this room understand this. When you're working with these critical infrastructure projects, when you have but one shot at something, make it count. Make it count. That is something I learned as a young lieutenant in the infantry in the 101st, and as a young Ranger platoon leader in 3rd Ranger Battalion. Make it count. That's fine. This documentary clip is a little
I grew up with
background on my
American cowboy,
growing up here in the Kansas area.
U.S. cavalry heritage. Was probably on a horse before I could walk. You know, I'd studied U.S. and Confederate cavalry commanders. We had walked the battlefields of Gettysburg and down through the Tennessee campaign. It was not lost on me that here I am in the 21st century, and I'm leading a 19th century cavalry.
They're in armored vehicles and pickup trucks. They're tied to their fuel depots, and so we were able to cut them off from reinforcement and cut them off from retreat.
I'm a 1993 graduate of Kansas State University, completing their ROTC program and going on active duty. My family still ranches here in north central Kansas. I grew up showing horses, competing in youth rodeo, and our rural Kansas high school team actually had a high school rodeo team. A number of our families. I was also the captain of our cow tipping team. If any of you are part of that. All right, there we go. I went on to Kansas State University and actually competed for 2 years at the collegiate level in team roping and calf roping. But who knew that upbringing by Kansas ranchers and cowboys and team ropers was going to play such a critical role in the success of our mission. The film clip I had just showed you is actually part of a documentary that came out about a year ago called Legion of Brothers. And it features my Special Forces team and 2 other teams and the unique aspects of our various missions right after 9/11. My team is very proud that that documentary, Legion of Brothers, is now out and sheds a little light on that mission and our partners that made it successful. By doctrine, Army Special Forces teams are supposed to have 96 hours when they go into isolation. That's your mission planning phase. I will tell you that my team had 48 hours. There was no plan. We were asking questions. My smart sergeants were looking at areas of northern Afghanistan as we prepared to deploy from Afghanistan, and finally as we were based in Uzbekistan. As we're preparing for that mission, there were so many questions that we realized no one could answer those questions. We had to get someone in on the ground. And we made sure our command knew that to a man, our team wanted this mission. Very much the spirit was send me, send us. We're the team that's ready to go. I had 5 of 12 sergeants that were combat veterans from Special Forces. Our average age was 32. We averaged 8 years' time in service. Our mission focus was unconventional warfare. I had deployed with this team 6 times prior to 9/11, working in Kuwait, Jordan, or in 6 months in the country of Uzbekistan in the year 2000, right prior to 9/11. This slide here is actually a mission slide that we were given. The areas in orange roughly outline what areas we believed friendly factions loosely controlled. And I would come to know these 3 main partners that we identified in the north as potential partners that were already in active armed resistance against the Taliban. General Dostum, who was the leader of the Uzbeks, Commander Atta, who was the leader of the Tajik faction, Commander Moakek, who was the leader of the Zaras. They each were independently fighting each other, and we could get them to realize if they could work together, then unite against the Taliban or Al-Qaeda, they were much more powerful. This photo was actually taken in our isolation tent. We were Chalk 7 to land in Uzbekistan. There was no infrastructure. My team slept on the open ground on the side of a Soviet MiG bunker for the first few nights, while that infrastructure then, in the form of tents and the rest of the command and control aspects, began to get in there and build up. We quickly departed that area to go on our mission. This is our homage to the forefathers in Special Forces, the part of the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, that we take our lineage and history from. This is our homage to the French resistance here. The Afghan leaders, mainly over in the east, Fahim Khan, did not want an overt American presence. So as that message filtered to us, staff folks ran out to procure this local corduroy jackets and pants that thankfully we did not end up wearing. They purchased that in Uzbekistan, but it didn't fit in at all in Afghanistan. I know you folks understand special capabilities and what allows you to be successful in your critical projects. I want to touch on the Night Stalkers. They are the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment. They are the best helicopter pilots in the world. This photo is an incredible technological feat of an Air Force Special Operations C-130 flying at near stall speed with that Boeing CH-47 flying at nearly maximum airspeed to conduct that aerial refueling. These crews train this regularly. What I'm not able to show you is they do it at night, they do it blacked out, and we do it at about 400 feet above the ground. And my team was all packed in, the 12 of us, into the back of an MH-47 like you see here to endure that several-hour flight. Shortly after crossing the border, our armed gunships had to turn back. Those pilots were flying off the heat signature from the engine on the MH-47, and we had a near mid-air collision in part of a sandstorm that affected, and the Air Mission Commander made that bold call to send the escort aircraft back, and we proceeded on alone, and the pilots put us down right at 2 a.m. where we needed to be.
At 0200 hours, the unarmed MH-47 drops ODA 595 at LZ Albatross. Through the night, Tiger II waits for General Dostum. He is known as a brutal warlord who has made and broken alliances with many factions. What will the morning bring? The answer comes in a burst of hoofbeats.
First, about 20 horsemen came galloping up. They're armed to the teeth, looking pretty rough. You know, the heavy beards, your typical Soviet small arms. It's what they possessed, light machine guns, AK-47s, RPGs, and about 10 minutes behind them, another 30 horsemen arrived with General Dostum.
To their relief, they receive a warm welcome and follow the horsemen to Dostum's headquarters, a 4-hour ride deep into the mountains. Only one member of ODA 595 is an experienced rider.
It was an incredible, we were going up stuff that, a foot wide, you're 1,000 feet up on a cliff that you knew if you fell, you were dead.
This was our first chapter in the Wild Wild West events that we would participate in every day.
That clip I just shared with you is part of a Department of Defense case study that was done about 2000-2003 timeframe to figure out how we were successful in that. You're going to ask, where did the original footage come from? General Dostum actually had a videographer and a photographer travel with him to archive that campaign, and now even several months ago, I'm still getting photographs 17 years later that I knew were taken, but I have yet to see. So these are the resistance groups. This is the real magic of what Special Forces does, is working by, with, and through local partners. In the case of my mission, it was to work with these various militia commanders from these 3 and 4 different ethnic factions. That's the real magic of what my team did, is to sit with each of these ethnic commanders and get them to sit down and agree to cooperate together and raise this army. On the first day, we had 300 horsemen under General Dostum with the Uzbeks. By 3 weeks later, we had over 3,000 militia fighters rallied around these ethnic leaders. 2,500 horsemen, 500 light infantry. This is our team. I had a 19th century force armed with 20th century weapons, Soviet rifles, AK-47s. Our largest weapon was a rocket-propelled grenade launcher. My Special Forces team brings in the 21st century technology. We've got satellite-capable radios. Eventually, I would get 5 of them, and I would get 2 additional personnel, 2 JETCs, 2 Air Force Special Operations controllers. And I would reconfigure my team, and we would actually do something that's still considered pretty crazy. We split down. The 14 of us split into 4 3-man cells with one of the sergeants, my communication sergeants, moving with me and our counterparts. And I split these 3-man cells out across a 60-mile area. We'll talk more about those cells in a minute. My team brings GPS-guided munitions coming off of this aerial armada that's overhead. We had 2 carrier air wings, Naval and Marine Corps squadrons coming off of 2 aircraft carriers in the Indian Ocean. We had B-52 pilots, we had F-16 pilots, and every manner of service aircraft coming out of the Gulf Coast countries, all coming overhead to get to us. We had night vision devices, we had laser target designators, we had lasers on our weapons that we would demonstrate our proficiency. This was our team. This is what we had. Our collaborative partners, as I touched on, General Dostum and these commanders are working to build their own alliances and have other local leaders come together. And it was incredible to see the Afghan Minutemen riding like fathers and sons or brothers coming together, communities of 20 or 30 riding their horses from upwards of several hundred miles away to rally around their leaders. To rally around their leaders to have a chance at a better future. They would show up with nothing more than maybe an AK-47 and a handful of bullets. We had the CIA partners that we had met with in isolation briefly that only got on the ground a couple nights ahead of us. But we were united. It didn't matter what agency you were from, military or intelligence community, you were united. What do you bring to the fight? What are your authorities? This is what we can do. And that small team of Americans became pretty close then, and we remain close today. As I worked closely with General Dostum and these different commanders trying to figure out, Dostum had an incredible plan. It was tactically and strategically sound. It was what resources can we bring to bear to help enable that plan. And that's where that form, most prominent form, came with kinetic airstrikes from these inter-service aircraft. But we also had cargo aircraft, C-17s and C-130s flying in nearly every night. They're bringing in lethal aid, small arms packages. They're bringing in non-lethal aid, cold weather gear, medical supplies, humanitarian supplies, not only for the militia army that we're raising, but also for the local population. This is what we're going up against. Soviet-era tanks that the Taliban and the Al-Qaeda fighters, their hardcore 5.5 brigade that are like their main factions or main core fanatics that were up in that area. They're armed with Soviet-era artillery, anti-aircraft guns that do not have radar but are employed effectively in a direct fire role against our force. And then they surprised us with this BM-21 volley. With several at this critical pass we would later have a battle at. The Department of Defense studies show and the intelligence reports show that we were arrayed against, and my team is credited with that force of destroying nearly 5,000 fighters as we pulled them in to that valley south of MAZAR-E. We were greatly outnumbered. It was some desperate days, I can assure you. But we had to find that opportunity. How can we learned early on, after different skirmishes every day, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? How do we survive the next 5 minutes? How do we survive the hour? We can win. This is what we got to do. And that's where, in conference with my sergeants, came this, we have to split further. That first morning we were in country, we split into 2 6-man elements, and my 6-man had a 4-hour horse ride. I don't know how many of you in here ride horses. Anyone? A couple of you. The 4-hour ride, my sergeants are learning how to ride in combat. The Army had not done that since early World War II. The 26th Cavalry is credited with actually charging against a Japanese infantry unit during the Philippines Bataan campaign. The Army wasn't exactly training us to ride horses at that point. They weren't training any special operators to do that. But these guys did an incredible job learning how to figure out how to ride this animal that wants to kill you. He doesn't want you on his back as a 200-pound American with another 50 pounds of lightweight gear. So they'd bite you, kick you at the most inopportune time. So you had to stay alert. Everything in that country at that time was trying to kill you. I'm sure a lot of this folks in this room know the inordinate amount of minefields that are up there. And we had to deal with that. That was ever present on your mind. Just so many things that we had to figure out. So we had to leverage all these different assets. This photo is of a B-52 strike. A B-52 Cold War era aircraft that had been refurbished somewhat as far as it was carrying precision-guided munitions. And we were figuring out ways that they don't exactly let you do in training in how to employ those munitions in combat. But the other strategic asset was really the human intelligence that we were getting from our Afghan counterparts. They knew who's who, what they were up against, what a desperate situation was, and that became a fire hose of information to me and my sergeants about what we were faced. And we were able to write countless reports and send that up. I learned also as a young captain, what messages am I communicating? After about a week in country, I'm very tired. My team has been riding every day. I'm riding 15, 20 hours a day. We're like the mail from the Pony Express. They got us on a horse for one move, and then you get a different horse and you're moving on to whatever that activity was. But I came back tired. We're running on 2 to 4 hours of sleep a night, reduced rations. And I got a message that was conveyed to me that Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld is not happy with your progress. Loosely put. And it was basically, when are you going to get off your ass and get to MAZAR-E Sharif? And I was stunned because I've been writing these reports. I'm writing what we're supposed to write. I'm conveying it, sending it up. And I realized they're still not getting the incredible things that we are witnessing. And so late at night, about midnight, I sat and wrote a report that said, in regards to your question about us and our allies sitting around, let me explain the realities on the ground. We are advising a man on how to best employ horse-mounted cavalry and light infantry in the attack against tanks. And I list everything again that we're going up against. And I remind them this tactic is a little outdated. And I convey some points about what we have witnessed. A guy with one leg walking miles to join us, and how excited he was and almost in tears to share with me that he was so glad that we were there. The Americans were there to help them with this issue. And I quickly learned also that that's what we represented as the Americans on the ground there. Whether you were CIA or Special Forces, they didn't know the difference. They referred to you as Mike or Mark or Steve. That's what they knew us by. But you represented hope and commitment, and you represented the U.S. government to them and all the promise that that could possibly bring with the resources you could bring to bear and the greatest thing of hope for a brighter future. One last point on that. I send out that message. I'm tired. The next day I get a message back going, hey, you need to clean up your language. Now we were getting these updates about all these new call signs that are entering into the theater and coming into country. And you really didn't know, well, was that my buddy's team? What team or group is that? Who's doing that? And part of that message was clean up your language because POTUS is reading your message traffic. I'm like a little tired of who is POTUS? What new call sign is that? President of the United States is reading your messages. The demand for answers did not cease. They wanted more information, what's happening. And this photo here is really what our secret weapon was. It's Green Beret sergeants in that 3-man cell matched with an Afghan commander that had between 300 to 750 fighters. And these dispersed teams of 3 Green Berets are figuring it out. Incredible problem solving. Figuring out what had to be done, what they could do. These guys are the de facto commander. They are the J2. They're gathering intelligence, most importantly. They're coordinating close airstrikes. They're coordinating resupplies. These 3-man cells would have their own resupply drop come in on their location. Doing incredible work.
This kind of operation just demanded joint concepts. I mean, every service was involved in some form or fashion, and we had to work together.
Without a doubt, transformation in thinking as to how we employ our forces was just as important as any of the transformation in the technologies we used in this conflict.
I would characterize OEF as a transformational battlefield. Fusing technology and fusing command and control and fusing information flow allowed for MAZAR-E Sharif to fall as rapidly as it did and to be as decisive because you could then transfer that ability, that technology, and that capability around through the country as we moved towards Kabul.
That's another clip from that DoD study. I was amazed, and I'm still greatly enjoy, even today, I got to hear part of the story of people that were involved, not necessarily on the ground, but people that were involved in different aspects of our mission. And I know some of you in your room were probably involved in some ways with that infrastructure that sprung up around and supported my task force or the others in the years since? Or you're possibly involved with infrastructure to house some of these detainees and these people that want to do serious harm to our country. This little thing, this is an unsolicited, unpaid advertisement for John Deere. I'm sure I made them several $1 million. You know what's not in the owner's manual? The fact that this John Deere Gator 6-wheeled buggy floats. We learned this the hard way in what we refer to as a Special Forces and Assessment Selection type event, where it was loaded down just like you see here, and somebody had dropped a bridge, and somebody had mined an area that we couldn't cross. And local villagers came out and said, no, 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 don't cross there in that minefield. I'll take you around my village and I'll show you another place to cross the river. And that's where we learn through trying to cross a series of 3 streams there. One, these gators flooded out, and we had 2 of them at the time, so now it becomes a push-pull event with horses and ropes with saddles that come apart. And my sergeants ended up in the water along with I, and you're swimming there, and it got dark on us. And that wheel right here by my head in that freezing cold water. I'm still waiting on my John Deere Gator. This was our motor pool. This is what moved our logistical supplies from those drop zones up to where those militia units needed them. And these donkeys would be loaded down. They'd have an elderly gentleman, maybe with his teenage son, no map, no GPS, and amazingly they'd find where that unit was at and deliver those supplies. And we had no loss of American equipment. And then once those supplies were delivered, that became the Afghan ambulance to bring these Afghan casualties, hundreds of casualties. Hundreds of them were killed in that campaign, and hundreds more were wounded. And they'd be brought on the litter that was airdropped in and brought back to our Special Forces aid station. I can't say enough things about our incredible Special Forces medics that are doctors practicing without a license. They do dentistry, they do veterinary medicine, they can deliver babies, set broken bones. Just incredible work. This was savage, crude medicine. My entire team, being cross-trained, helped support our team medics in treating mass casualties. Steve, my medic, was also working with an Afghan doctor who had about 20 Afghans that were their medical unit, providing support to their group, and we're getting the supplies in. But we helped do amputations and things like that, but they saved these people's lives. After we would get out of the mountains and into MAZAR-E Sharif, General Dostum and the other commanders, as promised, sent trucks back to get the wounded and bring them into MAZAR-E Sharif where more medical care could be provided. And after these folks got out of the clinic or the French hospital or Jordanian-supported hospital, they would come to find my team still living in MAZAR-E Sharif in our team house and come to thank Steve and the rest of my team for saving their lives. And there were dozens of these guys that came to see us. Very powerful, just that aspect of medical care. They had never had this level of medical care on the battlefield before. Two of my 3-man teams had to link up. These guys did a 30-mile hike to catch up with me and the rest of my team to go right into battle at a critical moment. This is after we've been on the ground several weeks. In that first month, we're on reduced rations. We're eating one nice, delicious military ration I'm sure some of you have had. And we've got an Afghan-provided meal once a day that's some rice and a piece of goat or something. I personally lost 20 pounds in that month in there. Every guy on my team was pushing, because we knew we were the team that could get this done. This photo was taken the 9th of November, right before this critical battle. After a series of battles, we've wiped most of the armor off the map. We've destroyed it. Anybody that could flee has attempted to flee. And we had outrun our logistics. We gobbled up about 80 miles in 3 days. And we were down to our last little candy bar that you carry in your pocket in case you got to evade. We were down to one working radio battery between a 3-man cell. We had outrun our supplies. And we had to stop and get water this morning, and allowed me actually to collect 11 members of my team together. While the 11 of us were getting water, the other 3 were already starting the music. They'd been first to the pass. They knew what needed to be done, and they started to open that battle there with more airstrikes. As we would go into that battle at the pass, they surprised us somewhat. They had heavily mined it. They will refer to reverse slope defense, whatever, technical military piece. They stopped us. They stopped the assault there of the horsemen going through with those mines and heavy weapons. And then they put that volley of rockets onto our force. Luckily, it wasn't zeroed in. It partially missed or partially hit, depending on which receiving end you are. But we were able to rally that troop, rally those militiamen around us, and get on through the pass. MAZAR-E Sharif was liberated the next day. There were 3 Special Forces teams on the ground as that militia army grew. From my team, as we rallied that force of 3,000, Ada was insisting he wanted his own team. And so earlier, we had brought in, on the 30th or so of October, we brought in 2 more Special Forces teams to help with that. Those 36 guys helped bring that entire army into MAZAR-E Sharif on the 10th of November. How many have seen that movie, Lawrence of Arabia? You get the scene at the end when Lawrence has got the Arab leaders and they're in Damascus and they're trying to figure out who's going to control what sectors. This is our version of that. We want to keep the airfield secure. That's being done by one faction. We want to keep what power plants there are. We want to keep that open. We want to keep the lights on as best we can. We want to keep the markets open. Who's going to keep the police on duty? Who's going to get the medical aid and things that we need coming into the hospital? Things like this. How do we get the road north to Uzbekistan open? So we're figuring out all these things. It's not us directly. We're advising the leadership, and then they're meeting with the who's who of locals, the businessmen, mayors, academics that turn out, different business owners. Figure out how are we going to do this and to put out that messaging to keep the markets open. My team was not home, as this movie portrays, by Christmas. My team transitioned from horseback to what you see here of ATVs and locally procured 4x4 pickup trucks. Our militia horsemen now have Soviet tanks. They now have those armored personnel carriers. So our logistical aspects with fuel and parts takes on a whole different meaning. But again, my sergeants had done that working with other Arab allies prior to 9/11 in the Middle East. We would go on for another 45 days of combat operations, and we would help facilitate the operations across 5 northern provinces. The area of the north are those 5 northern provinces that are bordered by that broken red line. And that our team and that collective efforts would be the catalyst for the liberation of those 5 northern provinces, which then stimulated other factions across the country and their special forces teams to then get momentum. And Kabul soon fell, Herat fell, and by the 5th of December, Kandahar had fallen to friendly control. A historic operation that was conducted with about 100 Green Berets on the ground, supporting that with local allies and bringing those faction leaders together. General Dostum paid my team this compliment. That's him in the green robe there. He is now the elected first vice president of Afghanistan. He remains a contentious figure in their history, but these guys are all still part of their future going forward. A lot of challenges, as many of you know in this room and have probably been involved in Afghanistan or other places. There are immense challenges to overcome. Their critical infrastructure has been utterly destroyed. But I'm very proud of the fact that General Dostum is still trying to be involved in the politics. And as of just 2 weeks ago, I got another message conveyed to me that Ada, Dostum, Moakek, and other ethnic leaders are pledging to still try to work together and support the U.S. government in stabilizing and rebuilding their country. They're trying to be involved in the next political effort over there. I've had the opportunity to go back a number of times in uniform as a DoD contractor doing manned aerial surveillance, and I went back as a private citizen a number of times, but this particular photo was taken in December of '02. I went back into MAZAR-E SHARIF doing this DoD case study, and I went to this school where they had about 150 teachers and 5,000 girls. They were running 2 shifts a day, and this school had just been opened about a month prior to me getting there. The winter's coming on. It's cold. It's freezing cold. They have no electricity. They have no heat, and the thirst for education that these students have was incredible. The upper photo on your left is of the Sultan Razia compound. On September 10th, I sent 4 of my sergeants to help deal with several hundred foreign Pakistani Taliban that refused to surrender. The Taliban had taken over this Sultan Razia girls' school in late 1999, I was told, and they had converted it to a military barracks and were attempting to get them to surrender. Ultimately, through the course of that day, we employed several munitions to destroy that force, and this was done in the center of the city, mere blocks from their centuries-old shrine. When I went back in December of '02, the photo in green, the USAID and the U.S. Embassy had worked to rebuild and reopen that school. And that was a prized thing for the whole community to have those schools rebuilt and reopened. I went back over the years as a private citizen doing a small humanitarian effort. And we would go back in and work in these rural areas with a couple other Green Berets and other American partners to help provide educational efforts at these schools. We would help them improve their wells for clean drinking water or some basic medical supplies. On one of those trips, the locals came and wanted me to go back into this rural area. What's hard to see in this photo on the left was there was a bridge construction project. Remember that bridge I said we had dropped during the course of our mission? 10 years later, it had still not been rebuilt. And a community of probably 100,000 people was separated for 30-some miles with no place to cross that river. And there had been a reconstruction effort, and some company came in and they built some concrete pylons, and then they abandoned the project for whatever reason. And that bridge project, to my understanding today, still has not been completed. But the Afghan locals had got this little suspension bridge and got it open and going, and there's traffic, and there's actually traffic directors at each end of that bridge. As you can see, a guy's taking a motorcycle across that thing. That's a brave guy. And then these little donkey trains would come, and as their donkeys going across it to take goods to the far side to those communities, right as they enter the bridge, the donkey steps through. And then these people step up there and they're lifting that donkey up out of the bridge and getting him on. And they bring the next donkey up. And guess what? There's a plank missing. The donkey falls through the bridge. And we watched them do this 3 or 4 times, and I was stunned. I was amazed. All you need is a piece of wood. You can fix that. There's so many solutions, but not all of them fix the real problem. The real problem is they need that larger bridge fixed. Still, this photo amazes me. I wanted to share that with you. So what happened to the rest of my team after our mission? Some of you may have heard of the former Marine, Mike Spann, who was killed during a battle on the 25th of November against al-Qaeda terrorists. Most of that CIA team we're still in touch with. They've gone on, continued their careers, and retired at the executive level. The portion of the photo on the right may surprise you to know that there's actually a monument erected where Mike was killed in the Kuala Jangi fortress on the outskirts of MAZAR-E. That monument was made by the Afghans, and it is dedicated to Mike and the other Americans and their Afghan citizens that were killed in this fight against terrorism. One of my sergeants that was critical to a 3-man cell that we split out first, those guys were 14 days on their own before they rejoined us in MAZAR-E. From the time I inserted till with my 12-man team, getting our attachments, 23 days later is when I had all 14 of us together. Sergeant Bill Bennett would go on to continue serving on that same small team of Green Berets in Iraq and was killed on the 12th of September. The rest of my team all continued to serve in some capacity, and it's just been the last year that the last few guys completed their 24 or 30 years of service and retired. These sergeants went on to lead their own teams. Several of them became sergeant majors, senior enlisted for a special forces company or a battalion, and deployed numerous times to Iraq or back as part of the latest Syria efforts. But we're all finally retired. Some of you in this room may have helped establish the detention facility in Gitmo. My team and I personally laid hands on 2 of these 5 prominent detainees that were traded for Sergeant Bergdahl. This is my team photo taken in isolation. At the end of our mission, they pulled us out, and Secretary Rumsfeld was one of the first dignitaries to come, and we had to brief him on that mission. This is what I do now. I got a little film clip that I want to show you here that has some incredible footage of an amazing engineering feat. Those of you that helped rebuild the Freedom Tower in New York City.
I waited a year, made up my mind, and then went in.
I was one of the original soldiers that went in on the early days after the 9/11 attacks.
Every bottle that's going to go through that mold will have been touched by World Trade Center steel. As we say, kind of forged in fire, kind of like we have been throughout our careers.
It makes it so much more important for us, so much more real for us, so much more of an honor for us.
This is the American dream. I mean, no ifs, ands, or buts. We've got our bottle molds made out of ground zero steel. We've got bourbon made by the guys that were on horseback over in Afghanistan.
With the statue of the horse soldiers in New York at ground zero, we all feel kind of like we're connected to it.
Each one of these bottles is its own little memorial.
All good journeys have a beginning, middle, end. They're based on history. Our story's based in history. We continue to make history, and we continue to be part of history.
9/11 has been such a part of my family and my teammates and my community's careers. Several of us we decided we wanted to continue to work together. And so now we've got a small business we're starting up down in St. Pete, Florida. And now we're kind of transitioning, we are transitioning to live that American dream that we've been defending. But 9/11, as I said, was such a part of us. And the people of New York City, some of you may full well know this story better than I do. They were very divided about what buildings should be rebuilt. How's that going to look? How's that monument? But one thing that united them was the decision to bring America's Response Monument there. This monument to America's Special Operations, intelligence community, and the American military servicemen and women that responded to those horrific attacks in 9/11. And they agreed, and that became a starting point, I'm told, for them to work towards agreeing on other aspects of that memorial. It's incredible that we're here. It's incredible I'm standing here today. And I thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about our mission.
What's amazing to me is we're not dead. You know, because they don't put things out like this unless you're dead. Yeah.
So there's a difference between a monument and a memorial. That's why it's a monument and not a memorial.
From being able to share a few hours with your group earlier today, I realized we have a lot in common. I know you are used to working with collaborative efforts, from bringing different groups together: military, government, civilian, private industry, academics. That has been kind of what I've been doing through my career, is working with diverse collaborative groups to come together to get at these tough, challenging problems. And I commend you the more I've learned about your organization today. I know you are helping change people's lives. The hope that those Afghans want over there, as an example that I experienced, I know many of you in this room have helped to do a number of those projects. And as we well know, those projects are still needed over there. There's still much more to do. And organizations like yours, the military and the government, can't solve it all. It's going to take private and corporate solutions to get at those critical problems, to rebuild that infrastructure. Going to Afghanistan all those times certainly makes me appreciative of all the infrastructure we take for granted, because I've seen that stripped away. Where there are no bridges, you have communities divided. The roads are, if they exist, are a path, or they're rocky, and so commerce and trade isn't able to happen. And I know the history and the lineage of your organization is what helped make America great by all that infrastructure that had been rebuilt, starting right out here in Kansas with the first miles of interstate that were laid back during the 50s. So I thank you for what your organizations do in working together and helping to inspire our young people to become engineers, or with your STEM efforts that are so greatly needed across our country. But I just want to say thank you. I would like to bring some other folks that have shared my journey up here on stage with me. I have my children here today that, if you'll allow me, I'd like to recognize them as well. Love you. Here, take a photo right here, right quick. Take a photo right here. Come on. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I know. Go ahead, you can go sit down, bud. Thanks. Hey, thank you. I just, it's a rare day to get to spend with them, and truly an honor to have them join me here today to address this audience. I got at least one or maybe two of them aspire to become engineers. So a little effort over there. Oh, I thank you very much. That's what I have to share with you today. I know I've run over time. Thank you all again for having me here and for what you do for our country. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Let's take it all in.
Thank you very much.
Mark, I can't thank, are these on? Here we go. I can't thank you enough for sharing your story with our group today. The parallels that you drew are exactly right. The collaboration, the importance of working with dissimilar people, dissimilar ideas of thought, but for one common purpose. And it was so well presented. The story behind the story is always the most interesting one. I had the pleasure of meeting your kids earlier today. They are marvelous young Americans, and they did explain to me that at least one of them said he was interested in engineering, and I hope that our little group can recruit them into our ranks. I would like to give you a very small token of our appreciation. You might have seen me give one of these out earlier. These are freshly minted. As you know, we're about to hit our first century of service. We plan on having many, many more. And it'd be our honor if we see you wearing this someday.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks.